Welcome to tonight's webinar, AWI Future Wool. My name's Ian McFarland, I'm one of the Sheep Connect SA team. So tonight's webinar is brought to you by Sheep Connect, which is supported by the Australian Wool Innovation, the SA Sheep Industry Fund and the Department of Primary Industries and Regions. For more information on Sheep Connect, please check out our website or follow us on Twitter. All of the recordings of the webinars will be put on the Sheep Connect SA YouTube, and so please feel free to have a look at that at some stage. So tonight's webinar, we have two speakers, Dr. Jane Littlejohn and Marius Cuming. Marius will take the lead on the talk tonight. So Marius, could I hand it over to you, please?
Thanks, Ian. Okay, thank you for that introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I spent 13 hours on Zoom non-stop on Monday, so I know how tiring they can be. I was barely functional the next day, so I'm keeping this presentation to a minimum. Just in terms of an introduction, I run a couple of thousand sheep in Western Victoria, and that's our 1950s shearing shed with a 1960s truck being loaded by a 1970s tractor. And on the right, that's the shearing team. The boy on the sort of second from the right is my son, who I asked to do that stencil. And so despite spending tens of thousands of dollars on his education, we still don't have an A in shearing, but I'm hoping that next year, his spelling improves. So tonight, this is what we are hoping to go through. A lot of people don't know what Australian Wool Innovation does, so it'd be nice to talk through what we are doing. Be good to talk through production, particularly South Australian production, and where the market stands now, so a little bit of market intelligence. Some great opportunities are popping up for wool, and a lot of these have stemmed from changes in the market and the changes the way that the world lives now. COVID has been really interesting for wool, so I want to talk a bit through that. But as I presume many of you are farmers, it'd be good to hear from Dr. Jane Littlejohn, who is the General Manager of Research. So she's going to be talking through on-farm research and development. And of course, we have some questions at the end. So what on earth does Australian Wool Innovation do? So AWI is in fact the grower-facing side of the business, and the Woolmark company is the marketing side of the business. This is where your levies are heading to. And so in terms of AWI, hopefully you've done or you've heard of at least lifetime ewe management, winning with weaners, and other such one-day workshops which have been very popular, which you can do through Sheep Connect SA. We train shearers and shed hands, and I can tell you over the last 12 months in South Australia, we've trained 268 shearers in shed, 121 novice shearers in shed, and 41 shed hands in shed. So we're hearing around the country that wool handlers as well as shearers are an issue. So that's what we do, as well as I saw in that previous slide, you will have seen the WoolQ Wool Exchange portal, which we've developed as well. We work through the supply chain to promote and advocate for wool as a natural, renewable and biodegradable product, increasingly important. We work with processes throughout the chain, throughout the wool supply chain, which is some 16 steps. Of course, we look at new product development, and I've got a few of those to talk through tonight. Normally we have this over a dinner, and we've done 40 of these presentations. We normally hand around some new products, so unfortunately we can't do that over a webinar. We work with fashion designers who basically choose what goes into their collections and what is sold at retail. And of course, no one actually ends up selling any wool until someone hands over a credit card and purchases a product. So what do? Well, we work with that whole supply chain, and we want every one of those steps to choose wool. We want farmers to choose to grow wool on their land, and increasingly people have been growing crops, choosing prime lambs, beef, what have you. We want them to choose wool, and of course the consumer can choose anything that they wish to purchase, but we want them to choose wool when they're looking at garments as well. So these are the pillars of AWI. I won't dwell on this too much, but sheep production and advocacy. Obviously, we want to increase productivity and profitability through our work for wool growers, and then consultation, and then this traceability area. This is becoming increasingly important as consumers and retailers and brands are wanting more traceability. They want to be feeling good about selling their product. Processing and innovation and extension, and of course, marketing. Now, this is not a wool poll presentation. We've been giving this presentation across Australia since February, and in fact, we started in South Australia, and thank you to Sheep Connect for doing that. But it is a wool poll year. I actually got my voting entitlements in the mail today, and so we're about to start this whole process where you get to decide not only how much levy you wish to give for research, development and marketing, but also we've won the jackpot because this year it's also a director elections year. So you get to choose who goes on the board as well. And we are the only commodity that has a wool poll. So there's around 400 projects across the last 3 years of activity at AWI and the Woolmark Company. You'll be pleased to know that we're not talking about a lot of them tonight, but we are talking through the ones that growers have asked us to talk about. So just a bit on production. Wool production this year in red as opposed to previous year, coming out of drought, wool coming out of storage, basically slightly up compared to last year. And across South Australia, interestingly, there's been a 7.5% increase in production year on year, but is still bang on 15% of the national production. Interesting, some big changes there in Tasmania and in New South Wales. Interesting slide here looking at region by region. Obviously, water is important for growing wool, and that's why the southeast on the far left has the highest graph there, but right across the chart there, that won't come as any surprise to South Australians, but hopefully anyone from Kangaroo Island is not offended by them being classified as Outer Adelaide. So the micron profile of South Australia, probably a little bit over a micron broader than the bell curve for the rest of the nation, and that won't come as much of a surprise, but obviously those lovely big pole genetics that you've been creating for many years are now very much the modern merino. So this is the price of wool over the last couple of years, and the middle section there, the unhighlighted section, is really the effect of COVID, and we've seen somewhat of a V-shaped recovery. It bottomed out at 8.58 cents per kilo around about this time last year. It was a terrible time for the wool market, but it responded very strongly. But interestingly, if you look in the bottom line chart there, which is the Eastern Market Indicator in US dollar terms, and keeping in mind that the world buys wool in US dollar terms, they don't buy it in Australian dollar terms, we have now really returned to pre-pandemic levels. But back in 2019, the Eastern Market Indicator at around $10 equated to close to $16 Australian, and now the equivalent of that is closer to sort of 14. But we are tracking along around that level, and we believe it is quite sustainable at that point. Okay, so look, we know how reliant we are on China, but this is a very interesting graph to display just how important wool is to China. So we've heard very much in South Australia, you're very conscious of the fact that China has placed tariffs upon your great red wine, but over time they've also put tariffs on beef, barley, cotton, crustaceans, lobsters obviously, and sugar. Wool on the far left has remained free of that. Why could that be? Well, this graph explains part of the story. So obviously, close to 80% of our raw wool heads to China, of which half stays in China and is consumed in China. But they have built their wool textile business, which is worth billions and billions of dollars, obviously, and employs tens of thousands of people around value adding to our wool, and their specifications based around Australian merino wool. So they turn greasy wool into wool top, into yarn, into fabric, and into garments. And the orange graph there shows the export value of those garments. And if you double that, that chart on the right-hand side, you also get the value of those garments that are consumed in China. So we mean a lot to them. And that is clear in this graphic. They cannot source the volume or the quality of apparel wool from anywhere else in the world. Just a couple of markets through COVID, which are quite interesting. People have obviously not been going to physical work, and the demand for men's suits has dropped off significantly. You can see there at the far right, around 50%. Now that's starting to lift. We've seen in the first quarter in Europe, the sale of traditional tailored garments was up 17%. But through COVID, people were just simply not buying tailored suits. However, they were buying knitwear. People were at home, they were wanting to feel comfortable, and knitwear actually went very well through COVID, and that is demonstrated through this graphic. So GDP growth rates, 2019 in blue, last year in orange, and 2021 in green. The world is recovering as the vaccine rollout is occurring throughout the globe. People are meeting again, not here in Victoria, unfortunately, or in New South Wales, but in many markets around the world, society is opening up again. And as it is, people are wanting to meet, people are getting married again, people are having parties again, people are wanting to look good again. And they're purchasing wool garments because of it. So a lot of our marketing through COVID was pulled essentially from markets and from retailers that had very strong bricks and mortar exposure. We wanted to work with retailers that could actually still sell, because clearly consumers were not walking into stores and buying woolen garments. So we focused our marketing efforts very much on China. That was, as we could see in those previous graphs, recovered better than anyone else. And we wanted to work with those companies that had a strong online presence. Now, this video is part of the Goddess Day campaign in China, where we combined with Tmall, which is really sort of the Chinese equivalent of Amazon, or the largest online selling portal in China. And this is a video that will make absolutely no sense to you, but it is a take on the famous fashion video Devil Wears Prada. The interesting part about this video is that every single garment shown in this video is readily available and sold through online selling. So it's only just a click or two away from this video to buying it. And I'll show you the sales figures afterwards. But here's basically part of the Goddess Day campaign. And in China, people purchase according to festivals, and the Goddess Day festival is a festival where women purchase garments for themselves, but also gifts for friends. I do say at this point that in the Cuming household, every day is Goddess Day, but here's this video.
春夏季可爱控制，我10秒后要看到。10、9、8、7、6、5、
So as I said, it will make no sense to you whatsoever, but what does make sense was the sales through that and the viewing of that particular campaign. 103 million impressions, 20 million video views through the campaign film and the social activation. And through the retailers, Net-a-Porter, Farfetch partnerships, the purchase to intent, you can see through the bottom there, was up 55%. And I can tell you that for every dollar that we spent, it returned 15 in terms of wool sales. And that particular, the Heroes cardigan sold out very, very quickly. It was just an example of marketing that was cutting through, that collaborated with a number of very, very powerful retailers, brands and platforms, and was part of a much larger campaign that was very successful. In terms of a different market, so this is the athleisure market, which has been growing at around 5% a year for some time now. This is a video that we created through the US, and it was the Feel Merino campaign, which makes a lot more sense to us, but also includes a bit of provenance, and once again shows that you can purchase these garments with direct click-through.
It's there when you wake up, in the darkness at first. It's in the silence. It's in breaking the silence. It's down the stairs and out the door. It's out there, up that hill, over that rock. Watch out for that branch. It's farther than you thought, but there it is. It's in every turn, every decision, every messy challenge. It's in the question, can I do this? Can I keep on doing it? Can you? You can. Because you made that choice a long time ago to do it the right way, the no start or finish line way. It's the only way, because that's the truth. You'll get up 1,000 times and 1,000 more for no other reason than knowing that you did it the right way. Because sometimes there is no shortcut, no easy way. You do it just because you want to feel it, just because you want to feel something real.
So America has been a tricky market for a long time for wool, but that was a campaign that had great cut through, that tapped into this sense of feeling something real, that wool is lightweight, that is breathable and is great to exercise in. And here's the data from that Feel Good campaign film, social activation, and the partnership on the left-hand side, 77 million impressions. But the one that really kicks here is the bottom right, $14 million worth of merino wool garment sales through this campaign. And it was sold through Amazon with a combination with Strava, which is a company that helps people exercise and measure that. So perhaps it's no wonder that what's his name, Bezos, is flying into space when you can create those sorts of results. But from our point of view, from the marketing point of view, it's very direct. You can see what's working and what isn't. That old saying of you don't know what side of marketing's working. Half of it works, half of it doesn't. Well, now you can, because you can directly measure it. Something that is concerning for us, that is on the horizon and is something that is taking a lot of work behind the scenes at AWI at the moment, is the EU labelling laws. So this is the product environmental footprint philosophy that is going through Europe, where in the next year to 18 months, every garment sold in the EU will carry a swing tag that has a traffic light system on it according to its environmental footprint, whether it's worse, average, or better for the environment. Now, the way that the life cycle is measured through the European Union methods that they have adopted for PEF, unbelievably, have actually painted wool in a bad light, because they have not fully utilised the cradle to grave sense of wool production, and they don't fully understand its biodegradability and renewability. It's rather frustrating. It's not so much a scientific issue as a political issue. If you look at the people who are in charge here, there are a lot of fast fashion brands that are already involved with this campaign. So we have the likes of H&M from Sweden that employs tens of thousands of people. We have Zara in Spain that also employs an enormous workforce. So we've had to work behind the scenes very hard to get wool assessed in a much better light. And to do this, we've coupled with other natural fibres such as cotton, such as alpaca, and it's brought together a very interesting coalition of natural fibre producers. And we're starting to make some headway here, but it's been a big fight. It's the sort of work that AWI does and Woolmark does through the International Wool Textile Organisation that isn't generally seen by growers. It's a big fight. We're a small dog in a big battle here, but we are hoping to turn the tide. So some new products that are available. This is normally the part of the talk where I start handing around some very interesting and innovative garments. For example, that garment on the left, that is a circular knit garment with no seams. So digital technology is changing the way garments are produced. Cycling apparel that used to have 10, 15, 20% of wool is now getting up around 80, 90%. So those garments on the right-hand side there have a very high wool content. But these garments are being able to be made through circular knitting and digital technology without any seams involved in knitting. So if you look at those patterns there, they are all placed in the circular knitting machines through computer technology, and that is coming out as one piece at the bottom of the machine. So there's no cut and sew. Another interesting part of sort of new age technology is digital printing. So if you look at that garment on the left, which is perhaps not something you'd always wear, you would have to, that jacket that she's wearing, that is traditionally something that you would have to dye the wool in a yarn or in a cloth, and you'd have to be committed to rolls and rolls of that pattern. So what we've been able to do now through digital printing is actually print on the textile. And on the right-hand side there, that is a 16 micron scarf that has that sheep's image printed on it. I'm not too sure why we put the pic tag on there, but that is a very, very impressive garment. This is breaking down enormous barriers, because you can imagine if you were a garment manufacturer and you committed to making that jacket or even that dress, and you were committed to that pattern and it didn't sell, you would lose significantly. But now, if that's not selling, if you need to change it, you simply change your design and print it on there. You've probably heard about the shoes happening through woolen shoes through both woven and knitted forms. They're very cool. They work well with wool's breathability, its anti-odor properties, and that bottom right shoe there is actually wool denim. So at this point, you've probably heard enough from me. I'd like to hand over to Dr. Jane Littlejohn. Thank you very much, and we might catch you a little at the end. Jane, over to you.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I am the General Manager of Research, so I will give you a bit of a snapshot on some of our on-farm research projects. And of course, our priority is fly strike management. And you may have heard that we've been investing in development of the fly strike vaccine with CSIRO and the University of Melbourne. And CSIRO have tested 45 formulations, and they are from an initial range of 26 antigens that have been discovered both by CSIRO and also Uni of Melbourne. We have proven that they produce high antibody levels within sheep, and that's Tony there from CSIRO vaccinating one of the sheep. And those antigens those antibodies that are created by the sheep do have some level of activity against fly maggots in the laboratory. Some certainly are killed, and some are very much stunted, but we've still got a long way to go in testing what happens to those stunted maggots, whether they will complete their life cycle, and also doing testing on the sheep, so testing struck sheep. We're looking at synthetically producing those antigens because that would make the vaccine more attractive to a commercial pharmaceutical company. And the AWI board has recently approved another $650,000 to fast track some research. So good that there was enough progress for the board to want to continue with it. So it's a matter of watch this space in fly strike vaccine. But going hand in hand with the vaccine development is the work that Uni of Melbourne does. And that continues on from the fly genome mapping that they did. And that is doing some population genetics on the flies to see whether genes are similar across Australia in the fly population, and there are some variations. We don't want to produce a vaccine that just works on the east and doesn't work in South Australia. And also looking at the, how the maggots actually do overcome some sheep immunity, which will be important for a fly strike vaccine. You would be aware that we did invest heavily in the clips and the skin traction, which was the sodium lauryl sulfate, and also some initial liquid nitrogen, or what was then called sheep freeze branding. But lately we've done some continued surveying of flies for their resistance to chemical prevention. And that did find developing resistance to dicyclonal and cyromazine. And you can find out how to reduce the risk of developing resistance and delaying it getting any worse by visiting the FlyBoss website. Certainly pain relief through analgesic and also anesthetics is important for continuing to mules. It does give us a degree of social license, and it some brands, garment brands are satisfied with that, others aren't, but there are 3 anesthetic drugs, and again, we've got loads and loads of fact sheets on the AWI wool.com website under analgesia and anesthesia. We've also got some best practice guides, certainly plan, prepare and conduct best practice lamb marking procedures is there. There's also some good guides on fly strike management. Certainly a website we ran, it's Fly Time, and I think we're running that again shortly, but also we're developing some face-to-face workshops, and maybe they'll end up being webinars, I'm not sure. Simplify being the first one, and then later on it will be breeding for breech strike resistance. So moving to reproduction, obviously that, increasing our marking rates is going to drive our productivity and our profitability. Lifetime ewe management, or LTEM, we've had over 12 million ewes go through that, and that represents about 30% of the ewe population. It's a massively successful extension formula based on sound science done, I think, at the end of 2008 on feeding and managing ewes. Other reproduction extension workshops and resources that we have are Winning with Weaners, Ramping Up Repro, and Picking Performer Ewes. And again, you can find all these things on the wool.com website. More recently, so we've got these little snapshot videos, which are targeting reproduction at the moment, called AWI Change Makers. They're really high level, simple messages, and they just reinforce the lifetime ewe management again and again in little snapshot videos. We're researching some more on pregnancy scanning, and this is really about the cost benefits to try and drive uptake for pregnancy scanning, because it is a key LTEM pillar, and it will drive, it helps you differentiate how to feed your ewes, basically. Supplementary feeding for lamb survival. This was something producers wanted us to investigate, how much trellis feeders versus self feeders, which creates the less disturbance in the flock, and therefore better lamb survival. And new feed-based options. We've been doing this for quite a while now. They're collaboration projects with MLA and GRDC and Dairy Australia, novel legumes in low rainfall applications, but also projects on phosphorus efficiency. You've probably also heard of the Merino Lifetime Productivity Project, and it's a genetics project, and it's the biggest sheep experiment in the world because it goes on for 10 years. We're about halfway through, or more than halfway through, and there's 5,000 ewes are being measured across their lifetime, which could be about 4 or 5 lambings. 5 sites, none in South Australia, but there's 3 in New South Wales, 1 in WA and 1 in Victoria. That MLP project, it's doing quite a range of research questions to do with breeding ewes. So, will early selection actually disadvantage? So early selection in rams disadvantage, say, genetics for that might be producing really good wool all through their life, plus good lambs all through their life. So that's a fundamental research question. Also, how do we break down the components of the number of lambs weaned, which is a trait under ASBVs or Merino Select. Many other questions, plus some bolt-on research projects to do with measuring the, I suppose, economic impact per hectare rather than per head on quantitative genetic analysis, feed efficiency, resilience traits, and other reproductive traits. So a wide variety of questions, plus also the economic question of, in terms of measuring traits, comparison of mix of visual or ASBVs, and what's, I suppose, the most cost effective for the genetic gain that you get. We also invest in sire evaluation, so the Australian Merino sire evaluation. We invest in their link sires, weather trials. We do stockmanship training and sheep classing, and also we support sheep shows. And we've got a massive amount of information on breeding for breech strike resistance. And as I said, that's on the website, but we're trying to pull that all together into a workshop. Our education and extension portfolio for you guys is massive, and it ranges across ages as well. And that's just a list there, which I will read them all out to you. There's the National Merino Challenge, which is for young people, young farming champions. Australian Wool Education Trust has had seed money from AWI, and they do support honours students and master's students. Breeding leadership is, again, your post-school age, so, you know, I think the cut-off's 30, I just can't recall, but that's really enhancing the leadership of those already in the wool industry, of young people in the wool industry. A young grower trip to China, that of course had to be cancelled several years now because of COVID, but I'm sure that will continue. And as Marius pointed out, you know, with so much of the supply chain based in China, it's just a fascinating journey for young people to learn the whole supply chain. Nuffield Farming Scholarships, the Australian Rural Leadership Program, those latter two are many RDCs collaborate on those two programs. Making More from Sheep is a collaboration we have with MLA, and it's been going on for decades, and it's so successful we just keep refreshing the content. Learn About Wool and Wool for School, and Marius started the Wool for School program, so that's I suppose the processing, innovation, that sector and the design sector, and learning about what wool can do in a design and a manufacturing sense. The Woolmark Performance Challenge and the Woolmark Learning Centre, and they're both the post-farm extension suite. Moving on to agri-technology, we have smart tag ecosystem. It's still in development. It's based on what the sheep wear. So there's an ear tag, which you can see there on the ear. It's a little white ear tag with a solar panel. And then that lamb is wearing a collar tag, and the ram is wearing a ram harness and a collar tag. And that ram harness has a smart sensor in it as well. And the two collar and harness, they're battery powered. So this ecosystem doesn't yet has GPS. We're still trialing that, but has readers in a paddock, which send radio, I suppose, some sort of waves that are pictured so that tags can talk to each other and tags can talk to the readers or base stations. And the sensors in the tag are accelerometers, and they monitor activity. And so what we can do is that activity is an expression of behaviour. So, and when we combine behaviour with location and proximity to other animals, we can produce welfare alerts, from disease. It might be, we're just at the moment researching diseases such as fly strike and worms. It could be predation alerts, because obviously animals will behave a certain way if they're being attacked by wild dogs. We're also creating a grazing and feed intake algorithm and reproduction. So we've got an algorithm for mounting. And what those algorithms are, and here's one for mounting. This video obviously will show a ram who's wearing a collar tag. And you can see the graph on the bottom there. He's just about to make some movements to mount that ewe, and you'll see the accelerometers are then measuring jumps. So that's in the vertical plane, the horizontal plane, and to left to right, and then a forward and back plane. So that's what's called a digital signature, and algorithms are created, and so that whenever that data is collected in any future, the tag will know what, or the computer program knows that that set of data actually means mounting event. You know, we want to have grazing behaviors. We want the tags to tell us about walking, when they're resting, whether they're sick, when there's estrus, when there's mounting, when there's lambing, feed intake. So a whole rumination. So there's a whole range of behaviors that hopefully when a computer program puts all them together, it'll help decision making in the future. This particular slide really shows a real life example. It was retrospective. We weren't actively monitoring the animals at the time, but the farm manager rang us to say that the sheep had died. What happened to it? So what we saw up the top here is the grazing activity, and obviously it ceased to graze, so it got sick from this point here, May 17, no more grazing. It was increasingly inactive, so the yellow shows standing, and from this point it really didn't move at all. Obviously died. And this graph down the bottom here, all these different colours represent different sheep. And the day it died, it was visited. Well, I suppose it had less visits when it was obviously sick, but the day it died, it had a lot of visits, so it must have had a wake. And after this time, very few animals of its cohorts visited the dead animal. That's it, and very open to questions from you. There are our contact numbers and phone numbers, which I'm sure Jodie and Ian can pass on to you. And thank you very much, and very keen to take some questions.
Thanks, Jane. What I'll do is encourage people, if you've got a question, pop it in the Q&A box, and while you're just popping your questions in there, just got a couple of things. Jane mentioned the supplementary feeding strategy project. So there's actually an expression of interest out at the moment for producers that are interested in being involved in that, comparing trail feeding and self-feeding. So if you're a producer that's interested in being involved in that trial, please contact Ian or myself, and we'll give you some further details on how to be involved in that project. The other one that Jane mentioned is breeding leadership. So that's for 25 to 35-year-old people working in the ag industry. Applications are open at the moment. They open on the 16th of August and they close on the 30th of September. And it's an opportunity to participate in the breeding leadership program, which we run in Clare in February next year. So if you want some more details, we've got someone that you think might be eligible for breeding leadership, please contact Ian or myself, and I'll hand over to Ian for the questions. Thanks, Ian.
Okay, thank you, Marius. Thank you, Jane and Jodie. We have a couple of questions, and please type more in the Q&A box if you have others. Jane, do you have a time frame for the fly strike vaccine?
We know when we will get some results, and so within the next 12 months, CSIRO would have done their fly ecology testing. So will flies complete their life cycle if they were affected by the vaccine? If, say, all that's fantastic and all going well, it still could be 10 years before any vaccine is registered. that's just the way things go with new products in our registration process, to make sure it's safe for consumers, safe for the, to eat meat, safe for the people that are injecting the vaccine. So it's a long haul.
Okay, thank you. There's a sterile blowfly project starting up on Kangaroo Island, some preliminary work, I believe. Is that an area that AWI is investing in or thinking about investing in?
No, we're not thinking about investing in. MLA have done some work on sterile insect fly. So we talk regularly with MLA. We haven't yet come to the agreement to co-invest, but we map out what each other are doing, each RDC is doing, so that we don't duplicate. So we're kept very much informed with what's going on and share our findings. And at the moment, because they've got we've both got extension projects that we're developing up. We're working very closely to make sure that we've got key messages that are consistent. So the last thing we want to do is confuse producers.
Okay, thank you. And then just a comment regards the feeding and managing sheep in dry times bulletin. I know it's one that's a key favourite when we have Sheep Connect events, but it probably requires some updating. Is that something that AWI is working on currently?
We've got a massive amount of resources on, I suppose, feeding sheep during drought. And the federal government is really focused on drought resilience, they call it. So we were just recently planning our strategy because the feds will really want RDCs to support their drought approach. So yes, refreshing all of those drought resources, not just from a response point of view, but also from a preparedness point of view. Making sure that everything is current, but also we're really relevant to have them, I suppose, regionalised, so that they mean much more to the producers. But definitely watch this space across all RDCs, really, because as I said, the feds are really going to be putting pressure on the RDCs to deliver and to help them deliver their drought resilience program.
Did you want to play that that catch and drag video, Ian?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, I'll just introduce it. So this is a video that was shot, I think possibly even today. This is, we're trying to approach shearing through incremental gains, and the catch and drag is a source of injury through a lot of shearers, as you know, and so this is something that has been designed and built in South Australia at Narracourt to minimise or to even reduce completely the catch and drag. So this is a prototype that has been built, and you are the first people to see this video. So it's a modular setup, but and obviously I'm not too sure of the capacity to retrofit this to current sheds, but that's a single race that moves towards the board and allows the shearer for the sheep essentially to be delivered to the shearer. So yeah, a little something, just incremental gains across that shearing automation technology area, because as we all know, many millions have been spent on robots. Over to you, Ian.
Great, thanks, Marius. We don't have any other questions, so I'd just like to thank Marius and Jane for providing insight into wool future wool. Thank you for joining the webinar tonight. Have a great evening. Thank you.